comes up there. And we're recording. That's how it goes. So the only difference in 1.2 as compared to 1.1 is now we are not just talking about what the angles are called, but we now know that these two lines, the two lines are going to be parallel. When this line is parallel to this line, then these things are going to hold true. The alternate interior angles are going to be congruent. The alternate exterior angles are going to be congruent. The corresponding angles are going to be congruent. And the same side interior angles are supplementary. The same side exterior angles are supplementary. The way your worksheet will let you know that they're parallel, they will tell you these are parallel, or they're going to have a symbol. And I'm going to show you what that symbol looks like. It looks like this sometimes. They'll have a little arrow and a little arrow. This arrow pointing to the right and this arrow pointing to the right means that these two blue lines are parallel. And then sometimes they may even have double arrows. It doesn't mean that it's twice as parallel. Usually it means that there's another line and they are trying to distinguish that these two are parallel, the doubles are parallel to each other, and the singles are parallel to each other. Sometimes that will be there as well, so don't get confused by those double arrows. The way that I want you to remember that the alternate interior angles are congruent, these ones I want you to know are the Z's. So I'm going to put a Z right next to it. The alternate interior angles are the ones that make Z's. So what I want you to kind of think about, let me switch this pin to a highlighter. Here's a highlighter. And I want you to think of the Z. If you see a Z shape, the ones on the inside of the Z are congruent to each other. Those are the alternate interior angles. We use this one a lot. We also use the corresponding angles a lot. Let me erase these highlighting things that I did. The alternate exterior angles we don't use a lot, but the corresponding angles we do use a lot, and the corresponding angles look like F's. And the F's are the ones on the inside of the F. If you ever see corresponding angles like 2 and 6, sometimes the F is upside down, like you think about it. Sometimes it's backwards. But the ones inside the F are the corresponding angles. And I put that there to you because as I'm doing a bunch of problems, the hardest thing is are they equal or are they supplementary? And so I know the Z's, the ones inside the Z's are always congruent. And I just wanted to give you those two shapes because that helps me a lot. That helps me, and there's only one other thing that I do that helps me as well. And that is erasing this whole blue line. Let me see if I can't bring that line back. Oh, that's not really what I wanted, but there you go. The only other thing that helps me is this. When I'm dealing with problems that I know the lines are parallel, I usually will label 1 and 4. I'll do this. I'll put the acute angle and its vertical angle. And then what I do is I will slide down the transversal and I will say that these are also the same. So I'll highlight all the angles that I know are going to be congruent. The Z and the F's. All these red ones that I have here are going to be congruent to each other. Red, 1 and 4, 5 and 8 are going to be congruent to each other. Switching over to blue, I'm going to put a double arc and a double arc. a double arc on 6, and a double arc on 7. All the blue double arcs are going to be congruent as well. 2 and its vertical angle, slide down the transversal, upper right, bottom left, upper right, bottom left are going to be congruent as well. It helps me so that as I'm doing all the problems, I know if they're congruent or if they add up to 180. The blue and the red add to 180. Okay? So I have a couple of examples for you. You have worksheet 2 in front of you, I believe. If you want to do this on worksheet 2, that will save you some time. So why don't you go ahead and look at these things and we'll do this together. Numbers 1 through 6, it says identify each pair of angles as corresponding alternate interior, alternate exterior, consecutive interior, vertical, or adjacent. So here's our choice. This one and this one. Are they corresponding? Are they alternate interior? That's the Z. Correspondings are the F. Alternate exterior, consecutive interior, vertical, or adjacent. If you know what it is, tell the person you're sitting next to what you think the answer is. I heard some people call it by its other name, by the name that we used in the notes from 1.0. But in 1.0 or 1.1, if you look at those notes, I gave you 2 different ways to call it because look at the choices. Corresponding, alternate interior, alternate exterior, consecutive interior, vertical, or adjacent. If I'm choosing from those, then this one is called consecutive interior angles. They're next to each other. They're both interior. If you said same side interior, you are also correct, but it wasn't one of the choices. You're supposed to know both choices, that these are the same thing, by the way. So that's the answer to number 5. That's the only thing you need to put, consecutive interior. You're going to be doing that for numbers 1 through 6. Then I've chosen number 14. If you want to do this on worksheet 2, you're totally welcome to. Number 14 says, find the value of x that makes line U and V parallel to each other. You will have to decide, are they equal or do they add to 180? Easiest way for you to decide. Here's 133, I put an arc. Then I put its vertical angle. That's 133. Then this other angle here in red must also be 133 degrees because vertical angles are congruent. And then what I do is I do top left, bottom right, and I slide down the transversal so I know, are these the same or do they add to 180? If you said that they are the same, you are correct. What does that mean? This 133 is equal this time to 5 plus 16x. That means your equation is 5 plus 16x equals 133. Sometimes the reds are going to match up with the red arcs, the single arcs. Maybe this might be a single arc, and then the other side will be a double arc, which means they add to 180. You will have to decide every single time. It's not the same every time. Okay, 5 plus 16x, I'm going to subtract 5, just like we did back in the worksheet 0. (133 minus 5 is 128. Divide by 16. That's a big number for me. Good thing I have my calculator right here. If you want to borrow a calculator from me, feel free to put your ID card in the pocket and it says x equals 8. If you plug this in, 16 times 8 plus 5, then that's going to equal that angle to be 133 degrees exactly, making those two lines parallel. That's how we do it. So I did 14. Now, how is it going to get harder? I'm going back to number 11. I saved number 11 because number 11 has a fraction in it. And because it has a fraction in it, some of you get confused by fractions, so I wanted to show you how to do this with your calculator as well. Given the lines are parallel, see those double arrows like I showed you before? That means they're parallel to each other. Find the value of x. First thing I do. This is one of my angles. It's in the upper right corner. I know its vertical angle is the same. These two are congruent to each other because they're vertical angles. Top right, bottom left. And I slide down the transversal, and I know that means this angle and this angle are congruent to each other as well. What does that mean about these two? Are they the same, or do they add to 180? So you set them equal to each other. 5/9 x plus 20 equals negative 1/3 x plus 16. Bless you. Now I would get the x's on the same side of the equal sign just like we did before. I would do the opposite of subtracting 1/3. I would add 1/3 x, and I would add 1/3 x to both sides. 1/3 x take away with 1/3 x makes 0. That makes 16 equals a 20. And 5/9 plus 1/3. Once again, I am going to recommend you use your calculator for this. 5/9 plus fraction button 1/3. And so you'll see I actually use the fraction button, I type it in, and my calculator will give me the answer in terms of a fraction in lowest terms. My calculator tells me it's 8/9 x. There is no place to put in the x when you're doing this, so you just have to know that this is 5/9 x plus 1/3 x is 8/9 x. And then subtract 20. 8/9 x equals 16 minus 20. If you don't know, use your calculator. You are taking away more than you have. It's going to be a negative 4. 16 minus 20. And then the last thing, since you want x by itself and you want to get rid of this 8/9, this 8/9 is multiplying the x. The opposite of multiplying is divide. Or when you divide by a fraction, what does that mean? That means you're multiplying by the reciprocal. For some of you, you're going to want to do this, which is fine. I'd only do that if you have a calculator. Or for others of you, multiply by the reciprocal. It's the same thing.
Sorry.
Thank you, Asia. And then, what is negative 4 divided by 8/9? Or what is negative 4 times by 9/8? I'm going to use my calculator for that. I'm going to do negative 4 divided by 8/9 first, just so you can see it. And then I want to show you that negative 4 times by fraction button 9/8 is the same answer. So it doesn't matter if you divide by 8/9 or if you multiply by the reciprocal, you're going to get the same answer because those are the same things as each other. And here's my answer as a fraction. Feel free to write it as a fraction or a decimal, doesn't matter. Okay? As long as it's in lowest terms. Let me see if I have any more examples. I do not. So that's where we're going to end our notes for today.